we've worked with over 20,000 veterans, which we've done in the last decade. We find that in 6 one-hour sessions of EFT, all of those fear responses in their brains are counter-conditioned.
Can you talk about the effects? I want to go right to the point of our thoughts and our consciousness in our body and in our health.
Yeah, well, in the 1970s, medicine and psychology began to talk about mind-body, the mind-body connection, but doctors, shamans, spiritual experiencers, mystics, and other people who work with clients have known about this for thousands of years, that our minds and our bodies are really interconnected. But then in the 1970s, we began to get really practical evidence of that in the form of fields like psychoneuroimmunology. That's a long word, psychoneuroimmunology. But it basically means as your thoughts change, your immune system changes. And so in a very simple way, you can demonstrate that by thinking about the stress hormone cortisol. And we all know we have cortisol, we have adrenaline, our very short-acting stress neurotransmitter. We have our long-acting hormone cortisol. And if you just think a negative thought with a lot of emotion behind it, your cortisol level will rise. And if you de-stress yourself, if you meditate, if you use EFT acupressure, tapping, if you go for a walk in nature, if you ground yourself, if you do yoga, any one of those practices will lower your cortisol, and then those effects will then propagate throughout your body. So now we understand, not just psychologically and spiritually, now we understand medically that it is incredibly impactful on your body to shift your thinking, shift your awareness, shift your consciousness. I mean, no, now it's affecting a whole slew of genes, neurotransmitters, and hormones. So your thoughts and your consciousness are profoundly effective at changing your body and changing your health. And that's the first place to go whenever you're confronted with a medical problem.
Wow. It's good to have all the scientific research backing up with this. But I wonder, with all our conditioning, I think we are animals. We have animals of condition, habits, So I wonder, when the person is so accustomed to be negative, or I work a lot with trauma, so it can be a result of negative experience in early life. So what you suggest to counteractive, I mean, you just mentioned EFT and meditation and nature. And I wonder, how much should we balance that?
Yeah, well, our brains evolved over the course of hundreds of thousands of years to respond to threats. And it's just a fact of our brain anatomy. It's a fact of our body. If you think about Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, at the very bottom, there's survival. And so when your body has a survival threat, when you're threatened by a predator, when you're threatened by a life-threatening situation, you have the surge of these neurochemicals like adrenaline and cortisol. You have many genes turn on, your brain function changes, and you are then well equipped by Mother Nature, by evolution, to get out of the way, get out of harm's way, and take care of yourself. And that fight or flight response is just hardwired into our bodies, into our nervous systems, into our hormones. Every single part of the body is really recruited when we feel under threat. And so that way of the body's functioning was really effective 100,000 years ago, 500,000 years ago, a million years ago, to get us out of danger. But the problem now is that we live in a world without lions and tigers and bears and all kinds of other hostile species chasing after us and trying to kill us and trying to compete for the same little patch of turf we have. So we have a very different world, but we still have all this hardwiring that responds to threat. And in fact, our brains default to a part of the brain called the default mode network. Whenever we aren't working on a task, our brains default to this part of the brain called the default mode network. And that part of the brain does really useful things, again, in terms of evolutionary survival. The default mode network, the network which our brain defaults, focuses on all of the threats that may have hurt us or come close to hurting us in the past. And the default network then projects those into the future and says, what if I have another situation like that tomorrow? So the default mode network is the brain's way of processing trauma. And again, it's highly adaptive for our ancestors. But today, in the absence of threats, we go into that default mode and we worry. We worry about the paper tigers in our mind and things that might happen in the future and probably will never happen in the future. We project out all these catastrophes, we ruminate, and it has dramatic effects on our body. The famous adverse childhood experiences study showed that if people had things in their childhood trauma, and they don't resolve that, they don't work on it, they don't release that trauma, by the time they're 45, 55, 60 years old, they have more heart disease, more cancer, more hepatitis, more diabetes, more obesity, all of these life-threatening diseases start to appear later in life as a result of unresolved childhood trauma. So that very evolutionary structure of our bodies and brains that helped our ancestors survive is literally killing us today. And so the challenge of modern humans is to release stress, to shift the way our bodies and brains work, and to give ourselves positive lives by using these tools that release trauma and allow us to move into a far better state.
Oh, thank you. And so important, as you're saying, is the paper tiger was the real tiger, or a person sees a little cord or a cable on the floor is going to react as if it's a snake. It's like we are hardwired for survival, which I think was very useful millions or thousands of years ago. But now we see like the boss become the bear.
Yes, or your husband, or your wife, or your child, or your parent, or someone, your friend of yours, or someone in your social circle. So we react to them, and it's out of all proportion to the real threat or the real danger. And so we live much sadder lives than we could live. I mean, we were meant to be happy. Children laugh on average. The average baby, 2-year-old baby, laughs about 300 times a day. And I know I have a 2-year-old granddaughter right now, and she just laughs all the time. She finds the whole world funny and fascinating. And adults shut that joy down by the time they're 4, 5, 6, 9, 12. By the time they're 25, they're laughing about 20 times a day. So they've gone from laughing 300 times a day to 20 times a day, and they've really limited their potential. And that's what we do as we grow up. So our challenge as adults is to tap away, to breathe away, to meditate away our trauma, release all of that so we can get back to being that laughter-filled, wonder and joy-filled baby.
Being open for life in a new way instead of the conditioned way from the past.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and talking about the tools, and you're mentioning about EFT, and not everybody knows about EFT. Could you talk to us, what is EFT? I'm just going to say EFT stands for Emotional Freedom Techniques. And if you can explain what it is and how it works, I think people would benefit from knowing more.
Definitely, because it's the most efficient trauma release method I've come across in literally 50 years of exploring. And EFT uses pressure on acupuncture points. So we have these points all over our body. There are about 360 of them. You can find them very easily with modern instruments like galvanometers, because acupuncture points have very different resistance from the rest of our skin. So we can run a probe of your body, and we can find very, very quickly where your acupuncture points are. And so we tap on those points, or we touch those points, or put pressure on those points while we think about stressful problems from our present or childhood traumas from our past. And it works really quickly. There are over 100 clinical trials of EFT. There are MRI studies, EEG studies, gene studies, hormone studies, all kinds of research showing that EFT works really fast. You think about a bad thing, but you think about the problems of your past, and you also then are applying acupressure with your fingertips, these acupuncture points, and really quickly, you'll literally watch people's levels of stress just drop. Like I worked with one veteran from Iraq. He'd been in the Iraq War. He came back from Iraq with a high degree of emotional trauma. He had severe PTSD. And as I was tapping with him and working with him, in a teaching environment. There was a camera crew there, and they were filming us. And one of the camera crew members was having a bottle of water. And when she was drinking her water, he did this with her water bottle. And this young man was ready to dive under the table because to him it sounded like the fire of small arms. And so here he is, his a perfectly safe environment, he's in a beautiful location, and everything's completely safe. And he is conditioned to respond to threats. And to him, just the sound of a water bottle is going to drive him into fight or flight. We tapped with him, we did EFT with him, and he released layer after layer of trauma. And again, you mentioned earlier that we worked with over 20,000 veterans, which we've done in the last decade. We find that in 6 one-hour sessions of EFT, all of those fear responses in their brains are counter-conditioned. Now they're hearing the sound of the water bottle, same stimulus, no response. They are just emotionally neutral around that stimulus. So their brains have removed the tagging from their memories of this thing being associated with fight or flight. In fact, in one study I did, we looked at little molecular tags called microRNAs that attach to the genome. And when these are attached to genes, they inhibit genes from expressing, healthy genes from expressing. And we found that in that study, that genes that are associated with PTSD are affected by EFT. And in 10 one-hour sessions, we saw those little microRNAs just popping off the genome. Depression microRNAs, anxiety RNAs, PTSD RNAs, literally just popping off the genome, and this person coming back to healthy function. So EFT is a really powerful epigenetic intervention to permanently remove those stressors, those emotional tags around those bad memories from your past.
Wow, and this is incredible because it's also people who think this is woo-woo, strange, what you're doing here, if you do this. It's very good to have the science base for these people, but also incredible work with PTSD. And I think one of the main reasons is because it's working beyond just the words, because, with trauma, and also developmental trauma, words, many times what happened is pre-verbal, and also in terms of war is not just words, as the body react, as you're saying, the bottle, just that sound, there was no word that could trigger because of the conditioning of the body to go into survival mode, and fast, go into survival mode really fast. So it's can you talk about a little bit this aspect that is words will not exactly happen or help, let's say this way, not happen, but help effectively as this particular called energy psychology, because it works in a different way with the person and with the problem.
Yeah, and you're right. And especially subconscious trauma, pre-verbal trauma, prenatal trauma, it isn't verbal because the body hadn't developed the ability to, that part of the brain hadn't developed yet, that has language. So, and in fact, in the first year and a half of life, the fastest growing brain region is the emotional brain, the limbic system. It's the brain, the part that grows together, wires together the fastest in the first 18 months to 2 years of life, and it's pre-verbal. And so you can't explain to that part of the brain, hey, you shouldn't be triggered by this. I mean, we've all tried to do that. I mean,
it's just a bottle of water. It's too late. It's already the reaction.
That's right. Yeah. So it's an emotional reaction that's below the level of the conscious mind. And so cognitive therapies and talk therapy are really wonderful for things that are verbal and you can approach verbally. For things that are pre-verbal, you need to have touch, you need to have the body involved. And we find that when you combine cognitive therapies and talk therapies with touch and acupressure tapping in EFT, the effect is enhanced. So people really rapidly drop their triggering. And we have done now many randomized controlled trials of EFT for PTSD, for anxiety, for depression, for physical pain, for autoimmune diseases. And we find that, again, people drop all of that emotion. Now, they still remember the events. They can still tell you about, like one woman I worked with on stage at a big conference, her big trigger event was that when she was, I think, 6 years old, her parents were divorced. Her mother was living in a different part of town with her boyfriend, and her father barged in through the back door, ran into the house, smacked the boyfriend. He fell over. There was blood spattered everywhere. He grabbed her and her brother, who was 4 years old, and he ran out of the house with them under each arm, put them in his pickup truck, and drove off and kept them for a while. So this highly traumatic event for this woman. And again, after she tapped, now when she first told the story, she was crying. She could hardly speak. She was so traumatized by it. But when she was done tapping after about 20 or 25 minutes of doing this work, she told the whole story. She remembered the memory, just no emotion around it. And so that's what happens with people. They have the memories intact, but again, they aren't going to fight or flight when they recall them, because we've counter-conditioned that through the tapping, which you can't do through purely verbal talk therapy type means.
And that is incredible, because the emotion, so it means the charge of that memory. So she can have the memory, it's part of her life, but not having the whole charge and the whole emotion connected to it, which is what affects our health so profoundly, and as we were saying before. And that's very important, I think, for people who also have pain and autoimmune disease. Is quite difficult, because you go to the doctor's going to say we don't have a cure, we're going to just manage symptoms, and many times there is remissions and people are reverse of autoimmune disease, but let's say they tell you there is no cure, and the person normally gets emotionally very upset and can be even depressed, because the foreseen future might not be the best picture. And I think emotions, in fact, affect even more this response of the body to deal with inflammation. And since we're talking about pain, I'm very curious about, as I mentioned before in your presentation, about this work with more than 1,000 pain clients that worked and had 68% of symptom reductions. If you can talk about it, if I understood right, they use EFT and echo meditation, which it's going to be great if you can also talk about that.
Yeah, so EFT is a really fast and efficient trauma release method, and it turns out that most pain, the majority of pain, is psychological and it's not physical. So a part of pain is physical, but a part of it is psychological. One of the funniest events I had, well, funny in a good way, but also really striking to me, was I just learned EFT in the early 2000s, and I was doing a book tour, and I was giving a lecture in a big bookstore, and there were people who raised their hands and wanted me to tap with them. And one guy had hobbled into the bookstore that night, Roberta, and he was on 2 crutches, and he had a big cast on his whole leg. And he explained to me that he'd been in a car accident 2 weeks ago, and he had pain, and he'd broken his leg, and he had severe pain. His pain was 8 out of 10. So I had him score his pain 0 to 10. It was 8 out of 10. So I did my talk. I worked with people on stage for a while. He kept raising his hand, wanting to work with me and do EFT with me. And I just didn't want to work with this guy, because I said to myself, he has a bone fracture. It's 2 weeks old. His pain's 8 out of 10. Of course, it's 8 out of 10. And there's nothing psychological here. I don't think EFT will work, because EFT works on the emotions. How can there be emotion around something as mechanical as a car crash, which he'd had 2 weeks before, and the fracture of his bone? And so I didn't want to work with him, but eventually I ran out of other people to work with, and he was still raising his hand. So I called him up on stage.
He was insisting.
Okay. Yeah, he hobbled up there on his 2 crutches, and we began to talk about the accident, the car crash, but we were tapping at the same time. And he talked about how he didn't want to go to an event that day, didn't want to drive to the event. His wife made him drive the day they had the car crash. Then he was angry at the other driver, who was inebriated. He was angry at the ambulance, which took a long time to arrive. He was fearful his leg wouldn't heal. He was fearful he'd have a lot of pain in the future. And we're tapping on these acupressure points all the time while he's explaining all these things, which are highly emotional. So that's the way EFT works. It's working on all these emotions. When we got done tapping, I said, well, what's your pain level now on a scale of 0 to 10? And he said, it's a 2. Now, that was a big wake-up call to me because I dismissed his pain as being psychological, but psychology is physiology. And so his actual physical pain really was a 2. It was real, but psychologically it was compounded by all these fears, all this anger, all these worries, resentment toward his wife for going to the event in the first place, anger toward the other driver, fear that his leg wouldn't heal. And so you remove all those emotions. And again, in about 20 studies published in peer-reviewed medical journals and psychology journals at this point, the average drop in pain is over 60%. And it just is the result of 20, 30 minutes of tapping on all of those emotions. Then you have the real pain to deal with, not all of the psychological pain as well.
Yeah, and this is amazing, and I think probably this was a call for you to see, oh, there is more aspects here. I think for the purpose of studying, it's okay to separate the body, the physical, the emotional, the mental, the spiritual. We separate everything, and now, okay, let's go deeper in studying this atom and parts. But in fact, we are one being, right? So I always feel like there is no even separation between your physical and your emotional and your mental. We are one, and each one influences all the parts. I know that's my holistic view. So, and I think you're right in terms of pain. I have seen also people who have autoimmune disease. Many times they have pain and they think, oh, this disease is causing me this pain. But as I work with embodied meditation, so embodied meditation, they also release emotional aspects. And when they release emotions, the pain goes down. And then you go, this is not a pain from the disease, but it's a pain for the emotional side of having the disease, or even something totally unrelated to the autoimmune disease. But
Yes.
and sometimes also they are not, perhaps you have seen that, I don't know, working with the patients with pain, that they are not sometimes aware of their own emotions. In this case of the accident, he was quite angry at this and this and this and this, and it just happened. And sometimes the person is not even aware of their own emotional state, what is going on, or if they are so accustomed to be seeing a paper tiger and reacting as a real tiger, then they are accustomed and they think, oh, that's normal.
And we have this belief in what is normal that is really untrue. And we can be much happier than we are. Like in my studies with people who are meditating, who are entering these deep transformative states, they reach extraordinary levels of happiness, and they reach that very quickly. And we've done quite a bit of EEG work, a lot of studies with EEGs, a few with MRIs, and we find that people reach extraordinary levels of happiness. The happiest people in the world are Tibetan monks. As researchers have been looking at their brains, they have extraordinary levels of this brainwave called gamma, which is associated with compassion, altruism, joy, happiness, all these positive emotions. And they have like, some of them have 7 times the amount of gamma of a normal person, and they sustain gamma for a long, long time. So yeah, there is research showing that we can be much happier, and we believe it's because of the world, we believe it's because of our bodies, because of our disease, but it's not necessarily so. And when you discover who you are beyond your body, beyond your disease, you have a different perspective. Ramana Maharshi, one of my favorite Indian teachers, he lived in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and he died of cancer eventually in the 1950s. And someone said to him at one point near the end of his life, Ramana, are you in pain? And Ramana said, No, I'm not in pain. My body is in pain, but I'm not in pain. So he was able to have that transcendent perspective and know himself to be something more than his pain. And often we're embedded in our pain. We think our pain is all there is. We think our pain is real. And again, research shows over and over and over again that some of the pain is actually real. Like, why does the pain go down by over 60%? Why doesn't it go down by 100%? It's because there is a real issue there. I mean, this guy had a real bone fracture, or you have a real problem in your body. You have to address that real problem. But if you are overlaying the real problem with 3 or 5 times that amount of stress, then you don't even have the real problem in perspective. So you go see your doctor, and your doctor says, what's your pain level? And you say it's 8 out of 10. He can't medicate away the 2/3 of that's psychological and spiritual. You have to do that. That's your job. Now, when you've done that, you go to your doctor and he gives you appropriate medication for what's left. So we need doctors, we need modern medicine, we need all of the factors that support us. We need a healthy lifestyle, we need functional medicine, we need good nutrition, we need positive thinking, we need clean water, we need positive social relationships. I have a piece on my website, and you can find this too if you just search for it. I had a friend who had a very serious autoimmune disease, and she said, Dawson, if you got my diagnosis, what would you do? And so I wrote a list of like 15 things I would do. And that's on my website. You can find that very easily. Just type in what Dawson would do if Dawson was given a severe diagnosis. And it's what the things you do, and they're largely under your control. Like things like eliminating negative people from your life. Why are you hanging around with your best friend from high school, which just brings you down every time you talk to her? Why are you watching that news channel? Why are you obsessed with watching CNN or whatever it is you watch and all the bad news there? Go watch goodnewsnetwork.org. Go watch positive.news. And you'll find all kinds of positive things going on there that are overlooked by the catastrophe-oriented mainstream media. So eliminate negative people, eliminate negative thinking. Negative thinking, like, for example, there was one study of Alzheimer's published in 2020 that showed that there was a direct straight line correlation between negative thinking and Alzheimer's. And the more negative thinking, the more Alzheimer's. Greater amount of negative thinking, greater amount of Alzheimer's. And so it's a direct causal relationship. Negative thinking is triggering gene expression, which is helping deposit these beta and amyloid plaques in the brain, which result in Alzheimer's. So it's powerful to shift all of these ways of being in your life, and don't settle for a little bit of change, a little bit of improvement. Just go for the best possible results. So use all of those things in your life. Think positively, great food, good exercise, friends, media. Listen to positive music. Don't listen to stuff that brings you down or that jangles your nerves. Listen to soothing music. So there's so much you can do, and it's all 100% your choice to counter condition yourself in those ways. So it's well worth taking advantage of all those resources.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much for saying that. And I think it's very empowering when we can do that, to have a choice, and we do have a choice, and to choose what is better for us. And I don't watch news already for many decades already. My husband loved the news. I said, if it's necessary for me to know, it will come to me, what I need to know. Otherwise, I don't need all this negative. I'm a very sensitive person, and I'm empath, and I have to really be aware of what comes to me, what is around me. Yeah, especially, sensitive people. All of us. Sensitive means I'm aware of it. Even once I was in the supermarket, and I thought, I don't remember now what I thought, but I thought something, and immediately I felt the cortisol in my blood. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, whoa, I have a cortisol shooting. What is it that I'm thinking here? Change, Roberta, change right away. It was, I'm that sensitive that I can feel the body immediately responds. It's so fast. And I said, okay, I have to be careful here with what I'm thinking and be aware and thinking things that are positive. And I think it's wonderful to be aware of diet. And I do agree with you. There is a place for medicine we need, and it's important. I'm not in favor of discarding the medicine. I think it's a work together is even better. I was very sick when I was young, and I was in the hospital. The hospital really helped me. I would say, no, don't go. It was very good, saved my life. But not everything is medicine in terms of pills. Like you're saying, the pain has a level, other levels is compound the emotions that are there.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we need it all.
Yeah, thank you so much for bringing this here, and also this empowering way of what a person can do. And go to your homepage. So talking about your homepage, we have a gift from Dr. Church today. The gift is a complimentary EFT mini manual and a bonus of immunity echo meditation. Over 1 million people have used the EFT mini manual by Dawson Church to unlock the power of EFT tapping. You also get a bonus echo meditation called Boost Your Immune System Naturally. Very important for right now. Your immune system is vital to your body's ability to fight off pathogens like viruses and bacteria. This audio track uses the evidence-based methods of EFT tapping and echo meditation to reduce stress and boosting the immune system naturally. So just click the button below. It will redirect to Dr. Dawson Church's homepage, and then you can download from there. And please do that and practice that. It's important. So I think we are in the end of our session, and I really, really would like to, thank you and appreciate for sharing all your expertise and your wisdom with us today. Thank you so much.
Roberta, it's a joy. I love sharing this. I love seeing people heal, and it's easy, it's effortless, and your life can improve dramatically. So use these tools. They're there for you. They're free. They're available to you. And please dive in and just give yourself that relief of stress and the best possible life.
Oh, thank you so much, so much.